Hi, thank you for coming, everyone. Without an audience, I would be speaking to empty air. So you've all made this possible for me to be here. Thanks again to the organizers, and it's great to be here. So I'm going to be talking about landing on the desktop with Electron, and I'll just tell you a little bit about the level that we're going to be going at. I'm not going to necessarily dive too deeply into advanced code. Because I know there's various levels of JavaScript developers in the room. I'm going to give us an overview of what Electron is, how I came in contact with it, and hopefully give you with enough that if you want to explore it, you can go around and play around with it yourself. So a little bit about me. My name's Nathaniel Okenwa, and I am a developer evangelist at a company called Twilio. Just out of curiosity, how many people have heard about Twilio? Okay, fair few. All right. For the few of you in the room that maybe don't know about Twilio, we are a cloud communication platform, and we have different tools, APIs, SDKs, all sorts of things to give developers the tools that they need to communicate with users. If that's sending a text, receiving and replying a text, building a smart bot, all of those things you can do with Twilio. I'm not necessarily here to talk just about Twilio, but you may hear it will come up at points. And you can follow me online at ChatterboxCoder. And if you come over and talk to me during the breaks, you will find out why I'm called ChatterboxCoder. But I joined Twilio 7 months ago now. Who's counting? And one of the first things that I was asked to do was to help work on this Twilio Quest, which is a game that they released last year, which teaches basically fancy documentation. It's a game that you play through, and it teaches you how to use Twilio. And at first I was super excited because Twilio Quest building a game, this is so cool. And then I was terrified. The reason why I was terrified was because of these logos over here. I am a JavaScript developer. These logos mean something else. That meant that we were going to be building a desktop application. And a desktop application, because we were going to have lots of people using the application playing the game, we needed to have it on Windows, Linux, and on Mac. And I was even more nervous. I had no idea how we were going to pull this off. Well, I understood how they were going to pull this off. I didn't know how I was going to be a part of that. And what I know is web technologies. Now, the good thing about web technologies is they are, well, at least in my opinion, this is what I know. And they are quite, there's so many resources about them for you to learn how to use them. And that's one of the widest platforms around the web. Everyone uses it everywhere, as opposed to desktop applications where each of these different OSs have very strict rules and guidelines of how you should build on each of them very, very differently. But this is where Electron steps in. And Electron allows us to use those web technologies that we know and love, HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, and use those to build cross-platform desktop applications, which means that a web developer can now build an application that is downloaded on a user's computer, and it can run on a Mac, on a Linux, and on a Windows. And what's really cool about that is that Electron does a lot of the hard work for you, integrating with all of those different OSs, and gives you a lot of functionality that you may not have from the browser. And I'll talk a little bit about that. But first, let's talk about how Electron came to be. And we're going to talk about what Electron is. Let's go back in time, back to the future, and I'm going to tell you a story that you probably have already heard, but to one of my favorite years. It is my #1 year, for literally. Lion King, the original Lion King, was the top of the box office. The PlayStation had just been released, again, my favorite console. And a small company was formed in a garage called Amazon.com. But another really important thing, especially to all of us JavaScript developers in the room, started in 1994, and Netscape came out with JavaScript, the first iteration of JavaScript. Fast forward to today, most of us are using Chromium, or a Chromium-based browser. And a lot of JavaScript in the world goes through this to render things on user screens. But also in 2009, another JavaScript innovation happened. We had Node.js, and Node.js suddenly released us JavaScript developers from only the browser, and we could actually build applications that would live on computers. And because of that, a lot of server-side applications of Node using JavaScript spun up. Now, a couple of years ago, I've forgotten the word and I don't have my speaker notes with me right now, the exact year, but a couple of years ago, GitHub were working on a new editor, Atom. How many of you may have used Atom for a short while? Okay, good, most of us. And when they were building Atom, they wanted to be able to build it once and deploy it over many different architectures. So again, on Windows, on Mac, and on Linux. And what they did was they combined a Node runtime and a Chromium engine in this beautiful marriage. And Node and Chromium had a child, and the child was Electron. and that's how Electron was born. And Electron is used quite widely around the world. How many of you maybe use VS Code? You use Electron. How many of you have the Slack desktop client? You use Electron. Those things are built by Electron, are built using Electron, and it can build some really powerful tools and desktop applications. So let's talk about how it works. So Electron is built out of 3 main JavaScript processes, right? So Electron has a main process, and the main process does a lot of the heavy lifting. And the great thing about the main process is it has access to all of the computer's APIs, or the APIs from Node that you can have with Node. And then you also have renderer processes. Now these renderer processes are attached to different views, or really and truly they're just attached to different HTML files. You have a HTML file and you have some CSS as well, and then the JavaScript that you would have along with that HTML file will represent a renderer process. Now the renderer process and the main process can talk to each other and pass information through. In the renderer process, you have all of the APIs that you would usually have on the web, and in the main process, you have all of the APIs that you have in Node. There are some extra functionalities to allow you to access Node from here, but you need to do some extra configuration as well. And I've just forgot about these slides. And now I'm going to do the most basic demo using Electron. So I'm going to show you some code that I have built. That's the wrong one. I need this one. Okay, so this is the main.js file that I spoke about. And this is for the most simple Electron application. We require app and browser. We bring in app and browser window. And what we do is when we start our Electron process, we are going to say that whenever it is ready, we want to run create window. Create window is going to create a browser window, and it's going to load a file. Here we've got source index.html. I'm going to go over here and show you index.html. And here it's just saying, hello JS monthly, hope all is well. I've got a button that I'm going to talk about later. And then we have a script. This script is a renderer.js file. And I've got this running over here. And you can see it is an actual window. And you've got your HTML, hello JS monthly, and hope all is well. And that's how you can get HTML running on Electron. But then with the renderer.js, we have access to certain APIs. And one of the ones that I just want to demonstrate here is the notification API. So I can create a new notification and give it some information and say that whenever someone clicks, we should trigger this notification. Now, this is actually a HTML5 API, and I'm using it from renderer.js, which is simple. I could also write it in the main.js and use the computer's native notification API, if that makes sense. And what that would do is using Electron, Electron will still produce the same notification. And just a little demo. And this is why I should not have do not disturb off. The reason I know that that's the problem is because once I did a live demo and it took me 5 minutes to realize that do not disturb was blocking the notification. So this is the most simple of APIs. However, sorry, the most simple of examples of how you can use Electron. However, Electron has so many other APIs, and I'm going to show you some of them. So Electron have released an Electron app that shows you all of their other APIs. So you can create new windows. You can create new windows as you go along. View demo. I'm going to escape that. You can handle window crashes. You can customize the menus that come. And if you think about a Windows, how many people use Windows here? A few. So in a Windows computer, I use a Windows computer as well. This menu that is here will show up where you've got the file and so on and so forth. And you can change those as well. You can also create context menus, which is what happens when you right-click. You can also access the file. You can use system dialogues. You can put your application in the tray as well. And you can go onto electronjs.org to download this demo. And it's got all of these handy code snippets that you can use to include them into your project. It's quite easy to get going with that. Now, one thing about Electron is that after you have built using your different web technologies, and the great thing about Electron as well is you can use React, you can use maybe Gatsby, you can use any of the JavaScript frameworks that you already know and love, as long as they're producing an index file that Electron can then access into. So it's really cool. I was actually working on a little a React-based application myself for something to do to learn Electron. But more importantly, so when you want to package your application, not yet. When you want to package your application, you can use an Electron Builder. And what this will do is this will give you a file that goes for Mac and a file that can go for Linux and a file that can go on Windows, and then they can install it. Now, I'm going to talk about Electron and how it was used when we were building Twilio Quest. So Twilio Quest is, the game is built using a game engine called Phaser, a game framework called Phaser.io, and it's really cool, you should check it out. And this handles all of the sprites and the rendering of the page, and game controls as well. However, one thing that we noticed is that when you're building a game, you often have patches that we need to release, and you need to get these to the user's computer quite regularly. And so because of this, this made us have to rethink our architecture and not just go with the basic Electron build. And we have something that looks like this. So I'll sort of walk us through it. So we actually have an Electron app, which is the Twilio Quest Launcher app. And what that does is it first goes over to our Firebase and checks if it's got the latest version of the game. And because we release updates like nearly every day or nearly every couple of days, there's nearly always a version that needs to be downloaded. And it downloads the latest game version. Now, the latest game version is just React wrapping Phaser, controlling our game. And when you break it down, it is just a series of HTML files in the end. And what will happen is when it downloads that, it creates a new browser window, a new game window, and that game window holds all of those HTML, CSS, and JavaScript files that we downloaded. And I'm going to just quickly show you what the game looks like. So, play Twilio Quest. I'm going to hit play, and then it loads, and you can move around once it's loaded. And it's got a whole thing. Now, the cool thing about Twilio Quest, because we wanted to use it to teach people how to code with Twilio, is because we're using Electron, inside the game, we have a node.js runtime. And this allows us to do some really cool things. The most important, the one that was found really cool, if I can, I won't be able to demo it because I've cleared all my missions. But we have an inbuilt code editor, that can run JavaScript code. So what we do is we have a mission where we say run some JavaScript code that makes a phone call with Twilio. And because we're using Electron, we can run that code and give them an error message, or we can spin up a server inside the game for them to actually interact with Twilio. And then we go off and check their status. But because we are using Twilio's APIs, even if people want to work on their own environments, we can still do that and we can still interact with their local host as long as they are spinning up a server somewhere else. And that's because we are using Electron. So I have gone through my talk much faster than I expected. Yeah. Thank you very much for listening. I'm free here if you want to ask me more questions about our implementation of Electron or just about Electron in general. And hopefully you found this interesting and maybe want to play around with Electron or check out Twilio Quest if you want. Thank you.
Well, I had the opportunity to work with something similar that is, well, not similar, that the same philosophy, Ionic. So we built HTML, CSS, and JavaScript that we use on iOS and Android. There was a problem that sometimes we had to work natively with Java or Swift. In this case, Electron, there is the same problem. Sometimes is needed to work on natively or is done in the way that you don't need at all.
So it's done in a way that with most basic use cases, you don't necessarily need to write native code. However, some people, I've never come across a situation, but I've read a blog post about other people who wanted to, and I can't remember exactly what they were trying to do off the top of my head, but they wanted to do something specific with their application to integrate with something in the OS for a particular OS. And then you can extend Electron with your own code as well natively. Electron is built in a way that you shouldn't have to do that. And as they grow, I believe they're adding more and more native APIs to allow you to interact with the OS more. So I can't remember specific examples, but I know that there are examples.
Very rare.
They try to make it as rare as possible. I can't tell you how much of it that is. I've not come across them myself, but I'm pretty sure if you spoke to VS Code editors, they will tell you about a lot of them because they're experts in it. Yeah.
You mentioned you embedded the JavaScript runtime in the game. Is that just the eval statement?
Yes, it's eval statements and then we clean it up as well. Okay. Yeah.
I saw initially a couple of questions. You also had the icon of Steam. There is a way to connect Electron with Steam, that would be pretty cool, or it would just for sure?
With Steam, you can upload a version of your game that can be downloaded. So it is pretty easy because all we're doing is hosting a version of our Electron app in for different OSs. So we say, here is a version for, and it's the same as if you went to our website and downloaded it. That's the same download you'd get from Steam. Steam is just this nice, once you put it on Steam, people think it's a real game. But yeah. Yeah.
Can you build an app which allows you to get events which are also outside your own app? So you
yes.
Can you open it?
Yes, you can.
Okay, that's interesting. Thank you.
What about security? I mean, is there like a decompiler for Electron apps where you can see all the source code and everything? Is it obfuscated? How do you debug it? I mean,
so debugging it is, you can debug it like you debug the browser. Because it's a Chromium engine, you can. I didn't show the dev tools there. I heard someone speak about security and you can decompile it. Other than that, I don't know. I wouldn't necessarily keep anything secret on a native app. You'd still want to talk somewhere else. If that makes sense. Cool. Thank you so much.